Ukraine struck a massive blow at the heart of Russia, an irreplaceable military target hidden just 70 kilometers across the border. Putin never imagined this short distance would turn into a death zone for his own army, but he was wrong. February 22nd, 2026, night. The most strategic, most silent infiltration operation in modern warfare history began, just an hour's bus ride away, and a single drone that crossed the border and stopped time. Now imagine the location. Russia's Kursk Oblast, a massive military depot thought to be inaccessible. Inside, it was filled with the fuel of a meat grinder. Envy and Ukraine confirm there were exactly 10,000 FPV drones waiting on the shelves. Each one was charged. Each one was labeled ready for duty for the next attack. Each one meant a future explosion for Ukraine. But those drones would never carry out their missions. None of them will ever take flight. None of them will ever find a target again, because that night the rules of war were rewritten. The Ukrainian Armed Forces 81st Separate Air Assault Galicia Brigade was in action. Months of intelligence paid off, and the operators pulled the trigger. This depot in Kursk was no ordinary building. It was the most critical logistics center of the Russian drone war. It was essentially the brain of this war. Inside, there were not only attack drones, there were reconnaissance UAVs, ammunition stocks, control stations, antennas, and light vehicles all under one roof. So what does this mean? In the past, such rear areas seemed efficient and secure. Distance meant isolation. Russia believed nothing on enemy territory was under threat, but this misconception that day was reduced to ashes forever. Ukrainian operators had been watching the depot for days, even weeks. They recorded movements, noted personnel changes, and waited for the right moment. Personnel entry and exit times, security patrols, weather conditions, all were part of the flawless plan. This would be the victory of patience and precise intelligence. At the moment of attack, fiber-optic-controlled FPV drones sprang into action. These drones were fully resistant to Russian electronic warfare systems and jammers. Unlike traditional radio frequency drones, they provided uninterrupted and covert communication thanks to fiber-optic cables. Fiber-optic technology allows the drone to be controlled without emitting radio signals. This meant that massive electronic warfare systems were completely disabled. Russian radars couldn't detect this small target. Air defense systems failed to detect the threat before the drone reached its target. No air defense could stop it, at least not in time. The drone silently crossed the border. Geographical distance was no longer a protection. The drone approached the warehouse and slipped through the window. Its camera recorded the terrifying scene inside second by second. Shelves full of drones, ammunition boxes, equipment, all organized, all ready, all waiting. But what they were waiting for was not an attack, but their own end. Video footage shows the drone moving around inside the warehouse. It scanned every corner, identified every target. This was not a random attack, but an extremely precise, calculated annihilation. The drone identified its targets, then exploded. The result? 10,000 FPV drones melted in flames. The ammunition exploded. Light vehicles were rendered unusable. 10 more pieces of heavy equipment were destroyed. The Russian army's drone attack capacity, which would have lasted for months, was reduced to ashes in one night. There is something cold and strategic about this destruction. 10,000 missions would never happen. 10,000 potential attacks would never chase vehicles or dive into shelters. War history is defined not only by the weapons used, but also by the weapons that were never used. And in this operation, there were 10,000 weapons that would never be used. So, do you think this was just a lucky operation? Absolutely not. This is part of a much larger and interconnected strategy. This disaster in Kursk was not unexpected. Actually, let's rewind the calendar just 1 week before this attack. On the night of February 9th, 2026, Ukrainian forces targeted a container depot in the Rostov region. According to United 24 Media, inside were 6,000 FPV drones, again being prepared for deployment to the Ukrainian front. The containers were filled with drone components. As a result of the attack, these 6,000 drones were also rendered unusable. In addition, a Russian airborne unit command center near the city of Sudza was also hit. The attack in Rostov was actually a kind of preliminary preparation for the Kursk operation. Same tactics, same precision, same impact. Now, let's add up the numbers. 6,000 in Rostov, 10,000 in Kursk, a total of 16,000 FPV drones in a short period of time. This is not just a number, friends. This means 16,000 attacks have been eliminated, 16,000 tank hunting missions, shelter raids, and the same number of supply truck chases. Now, these tens of thousands of special missions are gone. The role of FPV drones in war is vital. They're not flashy weapons. They don't roar. They just buzz. But they hunt tanks, dive into trenches, chase supply trucks on dirt roads. They are cheap enough to lose, yet critical enough to matter. Russia was heavily dependent on these drones. They wanted mass production, rapid deployment, constant pressure. Each drone requires a pilot, an operator, a plan. 16,000 drones means thousands of hours of training, millions of dollars in investment, months of preparation. All of it vanished in just a few weeks. This is how Ukraine systemically targeted Russia's logistics chain. Ukraine's moves were not limited to warehouses. Wars are not only won on the front lines, they are won in factory chimneys and on production lines, and Russia's defense industry is now also in the crosshairs. According to Military, on the night of February 17, 2026, Ukraine's AN-196 loot drones struck the Metafrax chemical plant in Permkrai. This factory was no ordinary place. It produced methanol, formalin, and synthetic resin. In other words, its products were directly used in the manufacture of explosives and missiles. During the operation, the distillation column was hit and production stopped. This was not just a separate tower, but the center of the entire technological cycle. Raw methanol was purified and refined to commercial quality in this unit. Damage to such a component usually leads to the immediate shutdown of the technological process as the unit operates under high pressure and temperature. Moreover, this was not the first attack on the targeted factory. It had also been targeted in September 2025. The crippling of the sanctioned Metafrax group shows that Russia's military-industrial complex is no longer safe even at home. However, these warehouse and factory operations are only part of the bigger picture of the war. The fourth year of the war is filled with historic successes that have rewritten military doctrines for Ukraine. Ukrainian military and political observer Alexander Kovalenko makes a striking observation. Mr. Kovalenko said, "The Ukrainian armed forces have done something unprecedented in history," and he is absolutely right. This war is full of unique firsts in terms of tactics and technology. Traditional military doctrines have literally collapsed in face of new technologies. For the first time, a helicopter was shot down with an anti-tank missile system. For the first time, an ATGM was used to destroy a boat. Hunting submarines with surface-to-air missiles had never even been considered before, but for the first time, a Russian submarine was destroyed by an air-to-surface cruise missile. And for the first time in 40 years of conflict, the flagship of an entire fleet, the Moscow missile cruiser, was destroyed. Is it over? Of course not. Supremacy in the Black Sea is now entirely in Ukraine's hands. Ukrainian naval drones have largely destroyed the combat-ready part of the Russian fleet. Russia was forced to evacuate its own navy from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, but even those bays can't save them. Even a Varshavyanka submarine in Novorossiysk Bay was hit by a Ukrainian drone. Now, in Novorossiysk, maximum Russia can rely on is launching Caliber missiles at Ukraine and immediately returning to the bay. But it's futile, because Ukraine can go there too. What about special operations? The legendary Spiderweb operation that took place on June 1, 2025 is unique in world military history. No one in the world has ever carried out such an operation. Dozens of long-range strategic bombers belonging to the aviation wing of Russia's nuclear triad were destroyed or severely damaged while still on the ground. The damage is estimated at $7 billion. This component, which terrorized Ukrainian cities with Kh-101 missiles, was largely disarmed. We must not forget the Kerch Bridge operation, which was a crushing blow to Russia's reputation in 2022. This bridge, a symbol of the occupation of Crimea, proved to be defenseless. We would like to see a spectacular repeat, but even in its current state, it was definitely a crushing blow for Russia. So, what is the real situation of the Russian army on the front lines throughout this process? Let's witness a terrible collapse in efficiency. What is the second largest army in the world in terms of tank numbers, which arrived in 2022 with tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and strategic aircraft using now? Kovalenko's statements sum up the situation. Soldiers who have never seen bombardment, untrained, inexperienced, forcibly mobilized.